like when I study Steve, I'm like, well, if we can pick out the best parts of him, how he looked at the world, maybe people in whatever they do, because I'm not out here building a tech company or anything, but I'm like, maybe there's good ways to integrate that. And when I read his beliefs in simplicity, and like I love marketing, as we've talked about, like I'd go back and I'd look at their ads, which were always genius. And I'm like, oh, that's it. Where there could be 10 words, he made 2.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where there could be 3 colors, he said 1 with black text. Right? Like he made you feel and think something by taking away. Right? And so he and Johnny Ive, like you talked about, I asked you.
Johnny Ive, who is that? Is that the guy with the accent?
Yeah.
The Australian accent or whatever? Or was it British?
I think he's British, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, Johnny Ive, in my opinion, is the greatest industrial designer to ever live. He was the CDO, Chief Design Officer of Apple. And the reason I asked you, like, if you just looked at it in your hand, was because that's what they did. Like, they sat there and they pissed off every engineer in the building because they're like, no, it has to look this way. It needs to be an infinity screen. Like, I have a case on my phone. They'd probably have a heart attack seeing that. Yeah. That's because they're crazy, but I'm not going to not have a case on this investment. But, like, still, like, I try to keep my case one of the ones that you can barely see it's around because I like the art of it. But they sat there like, you know, they still had to have the home button then, but the rest of it, they wanted it to be an infinity pool. And then when Steve saw that a company in Delaware had invented, this also came up earlier when you and I were talking, but had invented this patent that allows just the slightest delay of the eye when you slide across on your home screen on Apple. He's like, well, we got to buy them because we have to do that. Like, that's how it has to be. So he bought the fucking company. You know, like, there was such a specific way.
Yeah.
And he would not. It drove some people nuts, but the people, like his marketing company that advised them, I forget what it was called, maybe like something in Chow, like that guy, Ken Segal, wrote a book about it that a third grader could read, which is very apropos, called like Simplicity is Whatever.
Right.
Just about his experiences with Steve. And like everything they did was just less.
Right.
How do we do less? And it's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, he like the CEO of Apple now. I mean, he's doing a job, right? He's definitely fulfilling obligations. But Steve wasn't treating it like that at all. He was treating it like that was his child. Like that was him himself. Like
yeah.
Did you hear the story about him? The story about him like looking at one of the first iPhones. Maybe it was the first one, and he was on Google's website on the phone. And he was like in like 1 a.m., like late at night, I forget, but it was like a ridiculous hour. And he was looking at Google and he was like, he called the owner of Google or one of the CEO of Google. And he's like, hey, I think the shade of the red in the O is a little bit off on the iPhone. Can you double check?
I have heard that.
Like, that's just insane.
Yeah. That's how he thought.
You got to be fucking crazy.
That's how he thought. And it was like, you do got to be crazy, but also like if you're just wired that way, you know, and some of this stuff, like people out there, when you read it, maybe a lot of people don't on some things, but a lot of you think about some of this stuff, you just don't realize it. Like, I never realized how I thought about text, for example, like how text looks. I was always very exact about that when I would do something. That was probably another sign I was a creative person and just didn't pay attention. But like, I'd always be like, no, why does that T have the bar at the bottom? And I never thought about what sans serif and serif was, which I always get them mixed up. But one is where it's continuous, meaning like if you have an F, it's just the lines. The other is where it'll have like a design on the back end of the lines, like another line. You know what I mean?
Like a little swirly at the end?
Yeah.
Like a little like loop-de-whoop?
Just something that makes it not continuous. So they add. Right? So like Apple's text. See this right here? See the A up on the screen on N?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See the bottom of the A? How it has bars?
The little line, right.
That's either, I think that's serif, right?
Right.
And then sans, yeah, that would make sense. Sans is without, right? In Latin. I don't know. But sans serif is like Apple's text, where it's just the A. And like shit like that, He studied that stuff. He actually knew it.
That's
I never knew that.
fucking crazy, dude.
But
The stuff you never pay attention to.
yeah, like then I'd be like, oh, that's why I always would use this text on Snapchat instead
Like
of
that, right.
Yes, exactly. That's it. Yep. If people can see this right now, if you're listening,
Yeah.
Google sans serif and serif. But yeah, like he thought all those details.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe that's like part of the analytical thing too. So and maybe that's why
Do you think he was super analytical, or do you think he was
Yes.
just really?
he was both. He was a mix. He was very artistic, and he would deny analytics when it came to the final vision. So like if someone said to him, Steve, the data says that people don't want that wave screen, he'd say, fuck what they want. I know what they want. Right? I do that too with things. Oh, the data says people don't want this kind of music on a clip. And I'm like, fuck what they want. I know that hits.
This is what I want, right?
Then it hits. Right?
Right.
So it's like a yin and a yang. Like, yeah, it's hard. I definitely get it wrong sometimes. And he definitely got it wrong sometimes. But like when you're right, I mean, conviction in the eyes of, or in the face of pushback is very, very difficult. He was good at that.
What do you think he would say if he was alive today about all the criticism about slaves building his phones and mining the fucking minerals for his phones in China? I feel like he would have done something about that.
Yeah, well, I think he would have been fired as CEO because I think he would have said something way too blunt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't survive in this culture where we're living in right now.
For better or worse, and
He'd
trust
be
me,
canceled.
for sometimes it was for worse because he really didn't give a fuck. You know,
Right.
he had flaws, but like
Yeah, people say he was ruthless.
he would tell you what he thought. You know, and like think about that. And he died in 2011. Front end of Twitter culture, right? Like
Some people think he's still alive.
some people think he's. How many people think he's still alive?
I saw an Instagram post the other day. I think I sent it to you.
It's a bad start.
Where it was in Egypt, the guy sitting at a
no.
coffee shop in Egypt. They said it was Steve Jobs.
I've seen that's a famous picture. I've seen
Oh,
that.
is it?
Yeah, I still think Tupac might be alive.
Yeah, it could
that's
be.
my little rabbit hole one. But yeah, I mean, he probably wouldn't have lasted in this environment.
No, he wouldn't
and that's more of a compliment
Mhm.
than there's certainly some detraction, I'd say, to that, because he really, like, he'd say he was hard to work for, but his style apparently was he wanted to rip you like in ways that every HR person in America would have a heart attack today, but like he expected you to do that back to him. So like the people who would be like, you know what, Steve, I'll see your insult and raise you this one. He'd be like, great. Like
right,
you know
right,
the movie Ted, where he's
The teddy bear with Mark Wahlberg.
where he's trying to get fired by the guy, and the guy's like, you fucked an employee in the back of the store.
Yeah.
And you did it on top of a Frosted Flakes, and he's like, and I raw dogged her, and he's like, we need more of that. You're promoted. Like, that's an exaggerated version, but that's the way I've read it. And I didn't know the guy, but that seems to be
Right.
kind of how he was. I don't